Ride alongside Eliza as she faces betrayal, hidden pasts, and deadly outlaws in the unforgiving West. Every choice could mean life or death, and every shadow holds a secret. Will she survive the dawn or fall to the men chasing her? Watch to uncover the suspense and intensity. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. The wind carried the smell of dry earth and distant sagebrush as Eliza Cade stood barefoot on the porch of her cabin. One hand wrapped around the worn stock of her father's old shotgun. Her dress was faded to the color of summer sky left too, long in the sun, and the hem was dusted with the dirt of no man's county. Out here, she was Eliza Cade to the few who cared enough to ask, but on every government ledger, wanted poster, and newspaper scrap, she lived under another name entirely, a dead man's name, one that had kept her alive for 6 years. The horizon wavered in the noon heat, the air rippling like water. At first, she thought it was just a mirage, the shapes riding slow, deliberate, no dust plume to give away urgency. But the shimmer resolved into 10 figures on horseback, their outlines sharpening with each slow beat of her heart. Drifters, not cowhands, not ranch riders. These men wore their lives on their coats, trail-worn leather, patched dusters, hats pulled low against the sun. Men who carried their history in the weight of their saddlebags and the steel on their hips. She tightened her grip on the shotgun. This stretch of land saw its share of passers-by, but 10 at once? That was an army in its own right, or a funeral procession waiting to happen. The lead rider sat tall in the saddle, a man whose shadow seemed longer than the horse he rode. His face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but even at this distance, Eliza could sense the gravity he carried, the way the others rode just a fraction behind him, as if to give his presence more space. Her pulse hammered harder with each yard they closed. She stepped down from the porch, boots crunching against the hard-packed dirt. 10 sets of eyes locked on her, and for the first time in months, she felt the raw edge of fear nick her calm. The lead rider reined in a few paces short, dust curling around his horse's hooves. He didn't look at her shotgun. He looked at her face, as if searching for something buried there. "Eliza Cade," he said, the words heavy with an accent she couldn't quite place. Then softer, almost like a memory come back to haunt. Or should I say, Mrs. Jonas Vale. The name hit like a slug to the chest. Jonas Vale was dead, had been for 6 years. The name had been her shield, her protection, her lie. And now, here was a stranger speaking it aloud under the blazing sun, with 9 other men watching. She forced her voice steady. "You've got the wrong woman." A slow smile curved the man's lips, though there was no humor in it. "No," he said, leaning forward in the saddle. "I've got the right one. And I've come a long way to bring you home." Her breath caught, but she didn't lower the shotgun. Dust drifted between them in the windless heat. She needed to know, was this man here to claim a debt, or to bury the last piece of the life she had stolen? And more importantly, what did he mean by home? What do you think? Was he telling the truth? Or was this just the first move in a dangerous bluff? The silence stretched between them like a drawn wire, humming with tension. The other 9 riders dismounted one by one, the soft thud of boots hitting the dirt sounding far too loud in the still evening air. Eliza's fingers tightened around the stock of her shotgun until her knuckles turned white. The man who called her Mrs. Jonas Vale didn't move closer, but his presence pressed against her like a hand on her chest. She knew better than to let strangers see fear. In the West, fear was a currency, and if you let someone spend it, they'd take everything you owned, your home, your freedom, your life. "If you've come for water," she said evenly, "the pump's out back. If you've come for trouble, I've got enough lead here to send all 10 of you to the undertaker before supper." A few of the men chuckled under their breath, but the leader didn't smile. His eyes, a strange pale gray, stayed fixed on hers as though he was reading every lie she'd ever told. "We didn't come for water," he said. "And trouble? Trouble's been riding with us a long time before today. One of the younger riders stepped forward, a lean man with a scar running from his jaw to his collarbone. "Boss," he said, "you sure it's her? She don't look like no widow I've seen." "She ain't no widow," the leader replied, without looking away from Eliza. "She's my wife." The words landed heavy, but the men didn't seem shocked. Either they already knew, or they didn't care about the truth. Eliza swallowed hard, keeping her face unreadable. Jonas Vale had been her salvation, and her curse marrying him, even under a false name, had given her protection from men far worse than these. But when he died, she buried more than just his body. She buried the truth of who she was, the leader. Stepped closer, and in the dimming light, she caught the glint of something at his belt, a small silver locket, tarnished at the edges. Her breath caught. She had seen that locket once before, years ago, lying on Jonas's chest the night he was lowered into the ground. "I think we should talk inside," the leader said. Alone, her mind raced. Bringing him inside meant giving him her ground, her secrets, her defenses. Keeping him outside meant 9 armed men watching her every move. Either way, this wasn't going to end with a polite goodbye. She took a slow step back toward the cabin door, eyes never leaving his. "If you're lying," she said, "you'll regret stepping onto my land." A flicker of something passed over his face, amusement, maybe, or a warning. Then he nodded to the others. "Wait here." The two of them stepped into the shadow of the cabin. The door closed, and the men outside pretended not to listen, but every ear strained toward the wood. Inside, the leader removed his hat, revealing hair streaked with silver and a face lined by years of dust and gunpowder. "You've been running a long time," he said quietly, "but you can't outrun blood. Jonas's blood, or mine." Her stomach turned cold. What do you think? Was this man truly bound to Jonas by blood? Or was this just another trick to pull her into something far worse? The door clicked shut, muting the low shuffle of boots and quiet coughs from the men outside. Inside, the cabin was heavy with the scent of pine resin, oil lamp smoke, and something older dust and age in the wood itself. The smell of a place that had stood longer than the people inside it. Eliza kept the shotgun angled at the floor, but within a breath's movement of her shoulder, the man placed his hat on the table between them, as if that simple gesture meant they were equals. "Jonas never told you about me, did he?" His voice had the slow cadence of someone who never wasted words. "I told you," she replied evenly. "You've got the wrong woman." He leaned against the table, unbothered by the barrel of steel that could end his life before he could blink. "Jonas was my brother." Her pulse kicked. She didn't show it. She had learned long ago that the first person to react in a lie was the one who lost the game. "Your brother's been dead 6 years, she said. He nodded. "I was there when we put him in the ground, saw the dirt fall myself. But that doesn't mean his story's over." From the corner of her eye, she saw the silver locket in his hand again, the chain wound tight around his fingers. "This," he said, setting it gently on the table, "was his. He told me if anything happened, I'd find you." She didn't touch it. She didn't even look directly at it. Memories had a way of cutting deeper than bullets, and she wasn't about to let him see the wound. And what did he think I'd do? Invite you in for supper? He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth. He thought you'd listen. Because there's a man out there who put Jonas in the dirt, and he's still breathing. And whether you like it or not, you've got a piece in this game. Her mind roiled. She'd left that life behind, the chases, the bounties, the blood. Jonas's death had been the end of it, or so she'd told herself every day since. But if what this man was saying was true, then her years of hiding under his name hadn't been hiding at all. They'd been waiting. Outside, a horse snorted. The sound snapped her back to the present. "You bring 10 men to my door just to tell me that?" she asked. The man's eyes flicked toward the door. "They're not here for me. They're here for you, and they're not all my friends." The air between them thickened. "You saying you can't control your own men?" "I'm saying," he replied slowly, "that by sunrise, you'll have to choose who you ride with. And if you choose..." "Wrong." He let the silence hang. A noose tightening in the air, her hand tightened on the shotgun. She hated choices that were made with a gun in the room, but she knew in her gut, this was only the start of something far uglier. "What do you think? Will she ride with him into a past she swore she'd buried? Or will she stand and fight 10 men on her own land?" Night settled over no man's land like a slow closing hand, each finger a shadow stretching across the hills. The cabin's oil lamp hissed faintly, its flame bending and flickering in the draft that slipped through the cracks in the walls. Eliza sat at the table, shotgun resting in her lap, her thumb absently tracing the worn wood of the stock. Across from her, the man Jonas's so-called brother leaned back in the chair, watching her without a word, through the narrow window. She could see them. 10 men, their shapes broken by the flickering glow of the campfire. Most sat or crouched close to the flames, talking low, their hands never far from their gun belts. One paced in slow, deliberate circles, scanning the tree line as if expecting trouble to crawl out of the dark. The fire threw strange shadows across their faces, turning eyes into black pits and grins into cuts of white. "Your men don't look like they're planning on sleeping," Eliza said without looking at him. "They're not my men," he replied. "Half of them ride for me. The rest, they ride for themselves. The difference matters. That sounds like a problem you should have solved before you brought them to my door." He smiled faintly, but there was steel in his voice. "Maybe. I brought them here to solve it." The weight of his words sank into the small room. She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to. The night deepened. Somewhere far off, a coyote called, its cry sharp enough to pierce the walls. Eliza's mind drifted to the locket still lying on the table between them, its tarnished silver catching the lamplight. She wondered how many lies had been told to get it here. "You haven't told me why you came," she said finally. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, voice low. "Because Jonas's killer is still alive. And because the man who's paying him has your name in his ledger." Her grip tightened. "My name? Not your real one," he said. "The one you've been living under, Jonas's name. They think you know something, and maybe you do." She stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping across the floorboards. "If this is some bounty hunter's trick to draw me out..." Before she could finish, a sharp sound cracked through the night. Not a gunshot, wood splitting. She spun toward the window. One of the men outside was standing, holding a broken chair leg like a club. Another man was on the ground, groaning, blood seeping between his fingers. "They're testing each other." The man in the chair said quietly, "By morning, they'll be testing us." Her mind raced. 10 men outside. One man in here she couldn't trust. And somewhere in the dark beyond, a truth she had buried deep enough to think it would never crawl. "Back up," she turned back toward him. "If they come for me," she said, "you'd better make damn sure you're standing on the right side of the door." A slow smile curved his lips. "That's the thing, Eliza. When the shooting starts, there won't be a right side." "What? Do you think will she try to split the camp before morning, or wait for the first shot to decide who lives and who dies?" The night stretched on, long and brittle as a dry fence post. The fire outside had burned down to a shallow bed of embers, casting the camp in a dull red glow. Eliza stayed by the window, her shotgun within reach, eyes scanning the restless shapes. Beyond, men shifted in the shadows, their voices low, their movements sharper than the easy laughter they'd worn when they first rode in. The air was turning, she could smell it, like the moments before a summer storm. Through the glass, she caught fragments of conversations carried on the night wind. 2 men crouched away from the fire, whispering, their faces turned just enough to keep anyone from reading their lips. Another man sat on a log, polishing his revolver with slow, careful strokes, his gaze never lifting from the cabin. The one who had been pacing earlier now leaned against a post, arms crossed, watching the hills with the patience of a hunter. Inside, the man claiming to be Jonas's brother hadn't moved much. He sat near the table, hat pulled low, hands resting loosely on his thighs. "You're not sleeping," he said without looking at her. "Neither are you," she replied. "I've learned not to blink when there are too many guns close by," he said. "Especially when half of them might be pointed my way by morning." She almost asked which half he thought was his, but kept it to herself. Questions were worth more than bullets out here. You didn't waste them unless you needed to. A sudden sound, soft but distinct, snapped her attention back to the window. A man was walking away from the campfire, heading toward the far edge of the clearing. He stopped by the horses, crouching low as if checking their hooves. But his hand wasn't on a hoof, it was on a saddlebag. He reached inside, glancing over his shoulder before pulling something out too small to see clearly in the moonlight, but enough to make Eliza's gut tighten. "You know that one?" she asked the man behind her. He rose and stepped to the window, eyes narrowing. "That's Brenner. And no, he doesn't ride for me." The figure at the horses tucked whatever he'd taken into his coat and moved back toward the fire, slipping into the shadows between two men. Neither looked surprised to see him. Eliza stepped back from the window. "Your camp's already split," she said. "You've got thieves in your bedrolls." His jaw tightened. "And you've got a target on your back." The oil lamp flickered again, and for a brief moment, the cabin seemed smaller, the walls pressing in. Outside, the camp settled into a fragile quiet, but it wasn't the peace of rest. It was the stillness of men holding their breath before the break. By morning, the fire would be ash, the men's tempers raw from the cold, and the choices fewer. Then the bullets in her gun. What do you think? Will she confront the thief in the night, or wait to see who draws first when the sun comes up? The first pale hint of dawn crept along the horizon, painting the hills in cold blue. The camp outside the cabin was stirring, boots scuffing dirt, metal buckles clinking softly, the low murmur of voices that carried the weight of sleepless hours. Eliza had been standing at the window for what felt like forever, her eyes tracing each movement, her mind cataloging every man's position as if mapping a battlefield. It started with a curse. Harsh, sharp, and meant to be heard. Two men were standing nose to nose near the dying embers of the fire. One was Brenner, the thief from the night before. The other was a broad-shouldered rider Eliza hadn't seen speak more than 5 words since they arrived. His hand hovered near his holster, fingers flexing like they were tasting the air. "I told you to keep your hands out of my saddlebag," the broad-shouldered man said. His voice was low, but it carried. Brenner smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Maybe you ought to keep your bag closer then." That was enough. The man lunged, shoving Brenner back. The others in the camp froze, not to stop it, but to watch. Boots scraped, gravel scattered, and then there was the unmistakable sound of a hammer being pulled back. Eliza's breath caught. The first shot split the air. A puff of dirt leapt up inches from Brenner's boot, but the second shot was aimed true. Brenner staggered back, clutching his side, blood blooming across his shirt. Half the camp went for their guns. The other half stepped away, hands raised not out of peace, but to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. Inside the cabin, Jonas's so-called brother was already on his feet, checking the cylinder of his revolver. "This is it," he said. "Lines are being drawn." Eliza gripped her shotgun tighter. "And which side are we on?" He glanced at her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "The one that walks away alive." Outside, Brenner was on his knees, swaying, trying to speak. The man who shot him stood over him, barrel still smoking. Around them, men shifted, some toward the shooter, some toward Brenner's allies. The air was no longer cold. It burned. with the kind of heat that came before chaos. The horses stamped nervously, sensing what was coming. The ground itself seemed to hold its breath. Eliza stepped away from the window, heart hammering, knowing the next bullet wouldn't just be for a warning. What do you think? Will she try to take advantage of the chaos to escape? Or will she throw herself into the fight to settle old debts? The first true light of dawn broke over the ridge like a blade, cutting through the cold and spilling gold across the clearing. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it lit a scene soaked in gunpowder and fury. Brenner hit the ground with a grunt, his revolver skittering away across the dirt. The man who shot him was already turning toward the others, gun raised, eyes hard. That was all it took. The camp exploded. Pistols barked, the sharp cracks echoing off the distant hills. Two men dove behind an overturned wagon, firing blindly toward the cabin. Another took cover behind a stack of crates, his rifle spitting flame. Smoke rolled low across the ground, mingling with the dust kicked up by panicked horses. Inside the cabin, the man claiming to be Jonas's brother moved to the door. "We can wait this out," he said. But Eliza wasn't listening. She had been trapped long enough by her past, by her name, by men who thought they could decide her fate. She stepped forward, threw the door open, and raised her shotgun. The first blast dropped a rider who had been trying to flank the cabin. The second tore through the edge of a barrel, sending splinters flying into the man crouched behind it. Shouts rose her name among them, and another she hadn't heard in years. For a split second, she froze, unsure if the voice had come from friend or foe. "Move." Jonas's brother shoved her back as a bullet tore through the doorway, slamming into the wall inches from her head. He fired twice in return, ducked, and reloaded with hands that were steady despite the chaos. From the corner of her eye, Eliza saw two men breaking toward the horses. One of them carried something wrapped in canvas, the edges dark with what looked like blood. Her gut twisted. That was worth killing over. She sprinted out, ignoring the shouting behind her. Gunfire snapped past her ears, hot and close, but she kept going. One of the men turned, raising his revolver, but she fired first. He dropped, the canvas bundle spilling into the dust. The other leapt into the saddle and kicked his horse hard, vanishing into the tree line. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, but the fight raged on behind her. She bent down, hands trembling, and pulled the bundle open. What she saw inside was enough to make her forget the gunfire for a heartbeat. What do you think she found? Evidence of the man whose name she carried, or something far worse? The canvas was stiff with dried blood, its coarse fibers rasping against her fingers as she pulled the knots loose. The smell hit her first: old iron, leather, and something that carried the weight of years gone. The morning sun caught on the metal inside, sending a dull glint into her eyes. It was a badge, not just any badge. She knew that star-shaped piece of tarnished silver as surely as she knew her own reflection. The name etched into the back, half scratched, half faded, was the same one she'd been living under all these years. Jonas Halley. Her breath came shallow, quick. Beneath the badge lay a leather-bound journal, its edges chewed by time, its cover darkened with stains that might have been rain or might have been blood. She opened it without thinking, the first page filled with a looping hand she hadn't seen since before the fire, before the bodies, before she'd taken a dead man's name to survive. "Eliza," the first line read. "If you're reading this, then I'm already gone. But I reckon you've carried my name long enough to know it ain't just a shield, it's a debt." Gunfire cracked behind her, snapping her back to the present. She slammed the journal shut, eyes darting to the tree line where the rider had disappeared. Whoever had carried this bundle hadn't just been running from the fight, they'd been delivering it. To her, the chaos in the camp was shifting. Men were breaking from cover, some retreating toward the hills, others closing in around the cabin. Brenner's body lay still near the fire, a dark pool spreading under him. Jonas's so-called brother was pinned behind the porch railing, trading shots with two riders who had the high ground. "Eliza," he called, spotting her in the open. "Get to cover," but she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the badge in her palm, her mind spinning through a storm of questions. Why now? Why her? And who else knew what that badge meant? A shadow fell across her. She looked up to see one of the drifter's face she recognized from the night, before standing over her with a pistol leveled at her chest. His eyes flicked to the bundle in her lap. "Guess you found it," he said, voice cold as river stone. "Shame you won't live long enough to read the rest." The click of his hammer echoed louder than the battle raging around them. "Do you think she's going to talk her way out of this, or will she pull the trigger first?" The outlaw's shadow swallowed her as the morning sun inched higher, dust swirling lazily between them. Eliza could hear her own pulse in her ears, louder than the distant gunfire. The barrel of his revolver was steady, unshaking. This wasn't a man used to bluffing. He meant to pull the trigger. "Put it down," he ordered, chin flicking toward the bundle in her lap. She didn't move. "This belonged to a good man," she said, her voice low, dangerous. He smirked. "No, it belonged to a man who died owing blood." Her thumb brushed the edge of the badge, the metal cool against her skin. She thought of the journal's first page, of the weight of a name she had worn for so long it had become her own. And then she thought of the writer who had escaped with the truth still in his head. "I can't let you walk away with it," he said. In that moment, something in her shifted. She stopped being the woman hiding behind a dead man's name. She became the one willing to fight for it. Her left hand was still in her lap, fingers wrapped around the sawed-off derringer tucked beneath the bundle. A gift from Jonas himself, back when he was still breathing. She had never fired it in anger until now. The outlaw's eyes narrowed. Last chance. She didn't speak. She just moved. The derringer cleared the canvas in a blur, two sharp thunderclaps tearing the air. The outlaw staggered, shock in his eyes before he crumpled to the dirt. Gunfire from the ridge roared in response. His friends had seen Eliza rolled behind a trough as bullets chewed into the ground where she'd been sitting. The badge and journal were still in her hands. She shoved them under her coat and glanced toward the cabin. Jonas's brother was waving her in, but between them stood three armed men. Closing fast out, her only way out was toward the horses, but that meant riding straight into the tree line, exactly where the escape rider had gone. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the badge against her chest. If she went for the horses, she might learn the truth. If she stayed, she might not live to see it. Which path do you think she'd choose? Escape into the unknown, or stand and fight to the last bullet? The first full light of sunrise cut across the horizon, bathing the clearing in gold and pink. Eliza's horse reared, hooves stamping the dirt as she leaned forward, gripping the reins and the shotgun with every ounce of her strength. The journal and badge were pressed to her chest beneath her coat, reminders of a past she had tried to bury but could never escape. Behind her, the remaining men from the camp fired from cover shots, splintering wood, tearing dust into the air. Jonas's brother emerged from the cabin doorway, firing back with calculated precision, each pull of the trigger precise and measured. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Their eyes met, communicating an understanding forged in chaos. Survival required both courage and cunning. Eliza guided the horse toward the tree line, dodging the spray of bullets and fallen debris. Every movement was a calculated risk, every second a gamble. She could hear the cries of men she had once tolerated, the low curses of those who had thought they could control her. But control had shifted. Now she held the reins of her own fate. Ryder appeared ahead, emerging from the shadow of the trees. She recognized him instantly, the one who had escaped the previous night. He slowed, tipping his hat in recognition, but didn't call out. The gesture was enough. She understood he had information. Answers to questions she hadn't even dared to ask. The cabin was now a silhouette against the glowing sky, smoke curling lazily from the scorched timbers. She fired a final warning over her shoulder, the shot echoing like thunder. The remaining men ducked, giving her the split-second advantage she needed. At the edge of the tree line, she drew up the reins. Her chest heaved, heart hammering, but her eyes were steady. She wasn't just fleeing, she was moving toward the truth, toward justice, toward the fragments of a life stolen from her by blood and betrayal. The rider beside her slowed, offering a hand without words. She nodded, knowing that whatever awaited beyond the trees, it would be faced together or alone, if need be. The badge and journal were safe, their secrets intact for now. A compass pointing toward the road she had chosen to ride. In that moment, Eliza understood that surviving wasn't enough. Living meant confronting the past, claiming the future, and walking into the unknown with both hands on the reins and fire in her eyes.